When it comes to PS2 horror, there are two layers of it that most are familiar with. The first layer is your classics, your Resident Evil 4, your Silent Hill 2, 3 and 4 and so on. The second layer is stuff like, Cold Fear, Clock Tower 3, even hipster stuff like Kuon that everyone knows at this point because everyone keeps saying, hey, it's really obscure. But then you've got your surprise third layer that's buried so deep it's like a metaphor for the protagonist's guilt or something. Let's summon today's first game. Demon Summoner is basically if Van Helsing, Blood Rain, hell yeah, Blood Rain, and your mate's bad vampire fanfic were smushed into a blender whose sole setting was Eurojank. Developed by Atomic Planet and published exclusively in PAL territories by Midas Interactive in 2006, this is a rare horror game where the horror is less about what's on screen and more about the fact that it exists at all. I mean, they made it in 3 months. Set in Victorian London, the known time period for furry blokes and toothy freaks, you play as a vampire hunter named Theodore who looks like he wandered in from a cancelled sci-fi pilot. He's tracking down a demon, summoning things, brooding at candles, all the usual stuff, The plot is explained mostly through text dumps and voice acting so wooden you could carve it into a crucifix. Gameplay-wise, Demon Summoner is a mix of bad shooting and, even worse, melee combat. You get pistols, rifles and swords, all of which feel like you're fighting ghosts with wet cardboard. The environments are nicely bleak, and there's the occasional attempt at atmosphere, but it's mostly brown hallways and undead bullet sponges. So, is it worth playing? Not really, but it is a fascinating little slice of bargain bin gothic. What's even nuttier, though, is that Atomic Planet would later go on to make the scariest game of them all, Real Madrid the game. Oh no, they might not win 1% of the time. Bad vibes all around. Ghost Vibration feels like it was made by a team that saw Fatal Frame once, possibly through a window, couldn't find a camera down the back of their couch, and decided a haunted Geiger counter would do instead. Released by them at Midas Interactive in PAL regions and originally developed by Technomanj in Japan, this is survival horror at its most stubbornly awkward and not that good, as the analysts might say. But it is kinda neat and slightly interesting. You play as Bruce, a psychic investigator who enters a creepy mansion to find his missing partner. Oh what? That's never been done before. The mansion, of course, is full of malevolent ghosts. Can Bruce see them? Moody corridors and ambience that tries its best to smother you in dread. But the game ultimately ends up feeling more like a terrible Halloween ride at a coastal Welsh town. Your main tool is a spirit detector that beeps wildly when ghosts are near, which sounds helpful until you realise it's less precise than a shopping centre car alarm. Combat involves exercising spirits with this detector, but the controls are floaty and unresponsive, and the enemy ghosts clip through furniture like they've got somewhere better to be. Fixed camera angles and bizarre pacing add to just the general feeling of it being a bit of a mess. Imagine Ghostbusters meets Luigi's Mansion, but they don't have anything to chat about. Luigi doesn't like football, and you have this awkward thing right here. Considering it came out just in PAL, reviews were obviously practically non-existent. But is Ghost Vibration worth playing this Halloween? Well, sure, but only if you really get along with janky horror games that some random goblin on YouTube, hello it's me, says you should check out. It's obscure, deeply flawed, but undeniably atmospheric in a bootleg kind of way. I would check it out. Alright gang, Resident Evil is popular, let's do that. But for a $5. Curse the Eye of Osiris was originally a PC title by Asylum Entertainment, and it was quietly ported to PS2 in Europe and North America by Dreamcatcher and Wanadu in 2003/4. You can almost feel it straining to be cinematic with the same budget as a Tesco meal deal, but it's somehow even more depressing, and somehow damper. You play as museum curator Darian Dane, who's joined by token psychic friend Victoria, who are both investigating the theft of an ancient Egyptian artifact. Naturally, this leads to an outbreak of cursed mummies, screeching spirits, and various other low-poly undead. The story is delivered through very stilted cutscenes, complete with awkward voice acting and long pauses. Like everyone's reading off the back of a cereal box or script. Mechanically, it'll be very familiar if you've played exactly one survival horror game before. There are fixed camera angles, tank controls, healing herbs, and lots of keys. The problem is that the controls are off, the animations are sluggish, and the combat is barely satisfying. It would be creaky if it came out on PS1, let alone PS2. IGN called the game quite clunky and clumsy, which is about accurate, but should you give it a go? Well, if you want to see what Resident Evil 2 might have looked like on half the budget, go for it. It's not unplayable as such, it's just really lacking some brains. God, you know what? I love me some zombie plus verb media. No pretense at all. Zombie Attack is a PAL exclusive PS2 brawler originally released in Japan as Simple 2000 Series Volume 65, The Kiyonshi Panic. Brought to Europe by 505 Game Street in 2006, they were some real sickos back then. This stars a demon fighting special forces team member with a sword, some magic, and a surprisingly high tolerance for repetitive zombie violence. Oh, and there's some rice as well. The game takes place over 7 stages filled with shambling undead and the occasional survivor you need to escort to safety. Combat is viewed from a top-down perspective with basic sword combos, spirit attacks, and occasional ranged weapons. Enemies come in waves and levels end when you've cleared enough zombies and found all the hostages. Boss fights cap things off occasionally, usually with an oversized ghoul and some pretty laughable dialogue. Graphically, this is obviously nothing special, that's a Simple 2000 game. It's a bit muddy, it's very PS2 budget, but it runs smoothly enough and the controls are serviceable. There's no real atmosphere and obviously it isn't very scary, but the sheer volume of enemies gives it a kind of low-rent arcade feel. No major reviews exist, and that's basically because it passed through Europe with barely anyone knowing it existed. That said, it's not completely terrible, it's just very, very bare bones. It's a Simple 2000 game, so, you shouldn't expect much. If you're after obscure zombie-themed action with a martial arts twist, this is one of the weirdest options that doesn't completely fall apart. You want more zombies? Here we go. Zombie Virus was originally released in Japan as the Zombie vs. Ambulance. That's the showdown we've all been waiting for. Yeah, someone at D3 Publisher decided that the next logical step for the horror genre was to combine Crazy Taxi, Resident Evil, and an ambulance. Okay, you got me. This is yet another one that's technically part of the Simple 2000 series, but made it to PAL regions in 2005 thanks to, 505 Game Street, who rebranded it with the kind of name you'd expect from a fake game in a sci-fi movie. If they just kept the names The Zombie vs. Ambulance, it would have sold 10 million copies. You drive a clunky ambulance through city streets infested with zombies, picking up survivors while ramming the undead into paste. Between missions, you can upgrade your vehicle with things like better ramming power, fast acceleration, or new gear. There is a story here, technically. Some conspiracy involving viral outbreaks, evil corporations, and a protag with the personality of a charity shop carpet. But it is hard to care when the camera is fighting for its life and the frame rate's collapsing like a dying goat. The overall jankiness here is pretty impressive. There are twitchy controls, terrible path finding, stiff animations, and hilariously dramatic music that thinks you're saving the world, not clipping through a wall. Is it worth playing though? As a horror game? Not really. As surreal vehicular chaos with zombies that'll be fun for an evening? Weirdly, yes. It's awful, but it is awful in a good way. This is an interesting one, especially as the 6th generation and beyond really started to see a decline in FMV in general. Not to be confused with that scary ladder simulator. The Fear hit Japan in July 2001. That makes it an incredibly early PS2 horror title that predates most of the horror games on the console, and yet it vanished into the ether before long at all. Obviously, it doesn't help that it never left Japan. Developed by Digital Frontier and published by Enix, this is a surreal FMV horror adventure where you play as a cameraman guiding a group of filmmakers through a living nightmare inside a haunted mansion. This is 2 DVDs stuffed with full motion video, live actors, and funny little scares. control movements through FMV, solve basic puzzles, and direct panicked actresses while the creepy mansion tries its damnedest to kill them all. It's not a particularly deep or even that involved game, but it is kind of worth playing. If you want to play an interactive Japanese B-movie, hell yeah, you should absolutely check this out, especially if you've got some friends over. It's archaic, bizarre, and tonally unhinged, but also hard not to giggle and kick your feet over. As if you're trying to take off your glass slipper. This is a really hard segue. Anyway, Glass Rose, that's the next one. You know what, I really love the box art for this one. It looks like an alternate timeline poster for The Bachelor Season 17. Glass Rose plays like an Art Nouveau murder mystery shoved through a distorted time machine. Released by Capcom only for Japan and Europe, this PS2 point-and-click thriller stars Takashi, an amateur journalist who slips from 2003 into 1929 when he and his friends investigate a haunted mansion. So annoying when that happens. Once there, he's mistaken for a long-lost heir. So, of course, he uses a psychic divine judgment ability to read minds and hunt down a family killer. And yeah, that sounds about right for the guys he would eventually go on to make Hotel Dusk Room 215 for the Nintendo DS. Mechanically speaking, the game is very ambitious. You navigate by cursor, including with optional mouse support, and click on objects, interrogate NPCs by highlighting keywords, manage mind points, fend off resets tied to scripted hours, and occasionally tap through QTEs or chase invisible butterfly health pickups. It's a lot, and it is not for everyone. But could it be for you? Well, Glass Rose is like a moody PS2 murder mystery that trips over its own shoes constantly, but still insists on walking with style, even if it takes twice as long as it should. It's clunky, confusing, and full of strange design choices, but there's something about it that's kinda neat. Just be aware that it's not the greatest game you will ever play in your life.
Number 1, Lifeline. Yes. Number 2, Drumming.
And this one definitely isn't either. Lifeline, aka Operator's Side in Japan, is a weird, audacious little PS2 horror game from 2003 that makes you trade your controller for your voice. You're this unknown operator who's stuck in a control room aboard a luxury space station, and your mission is to verbally guide bartender turned survivor Rio through a monster invasion using only a PS2 mic and voice commands. It's like SOCOM, but not very good. What stands out in Konami's little slice of silliness is that it's totally voice controlled. There's no walking around yourself whatsoever. If you want Rio to run, you say run. Want her to shoot? Say shoot. Need her to examine something? Just ask. There are around 500 commands that the game recognizes, ranging from dodge to delightfully do a sexy pose, because 2003 was a wild time. That novelty earned Lifeline praise in Wired for being a glimpse of future gaming technology. Well, it's 20 years later. Where are all the voice-controlled games? Pretty much everyone griped about how wonky the speech detection could be here, especially if your enunciation isn't Michelin star clear, and makes the game kind of a headache to suffer through today, especially when you can make your mobile phone your girlfriend these days. Voice recognition aside, the game adopts a solid survival horror formula, where you got monster battles, inventory management, puzzle solving, just with a screaming waitress and no physical control. There is a kind of cult following to it now, especially among content creators who like kinda weird crap jank. Should you play it though? Totally, if you talk like David Attenborough. Otherwise, you might be hungry for something that plays a bit more like a real game. Hungry Ghosts is a Japanese-only PS2 survival horror oddity that throws you straight into Buddhist hell with a spear in one hand and a broken crossbow in the other. Imagine Kingsfield, but potentially even weirder, and you have a good idea. Released in 2003 by Deep Space, you are a recently deceased warrior plodding through the afterlife who's fighting corrupted souls so you can either ascend or not. You gather soul fragments by helping other spirits, and your actions literally shape whether you're deemed worthy of rebirth or suffer more limbo. More afterlife judgment in modern games, please, devs. Gameplay involved in first person with light action and text-driven prompts. Weapons are sparse, and you usually have to stick with your starting spear unless you find rare gear. Examining objects, triggering events, and moral choices matter quite a lot here. It's all pretty neat. There's no English fan translation and basically no Western coverage, so this game is as obscure as they come. But it does have a community who are trying to translate it, but they've not updated at all in 2025 at the time of recording, so yeah. Hungry Ghosts is slow, obtuse, and not remotely comforting, but if you want a budget spiritual horror that actually makes you think it has surprisingly great graphics, this might just feed your curiosity. It's even published by Sony too, so a port of some kind isn't entirely impossible. Right, for the final game, why not? Let's just do it. Sometimes the obvious joke is the best joke, but at least this one's got a number on it. Obscure 2, aka Obscure the Aftermath in North America, is the 2007 college campus sequel to the teen slasher survival horror Obscure. You'll never guess how famous these games are. Developed by Hydrovision and published by PlayLogic in PAL regions, Obscure 2 dropped on PS2, PC, Wii and later PSP, complete with haunting costumes, a choir soundtrack and horror movie energy. 2 years after the Leafmore High freakout, survivors are now at Fall Creek University, dealing with mutant flower-based nightmares and tripping students. You juggle between characters, each with unique skills like crate moving, or lockpicking, and you switch on the fly to solve puzzles or take down monsters. Gameplay it's alright. Yeah, it's alright. You have light-based combat, item scavenging, and co-op with your partner able to drop in at any time. IGN gave the game a 6 out of 10 and focused on the awful voice acting and embarrassing plotline. Ouch. GameSpot also weren't that kind, giving it another 6 out of 10. But should you play it with a mate? Well, only if you crave cheesy nightmares with a buddy and you somehow don't own anything that has a Resident Evil 5 on it. Obscure 2 is flawed, half-baked, but oddly nostalgic, and very wonderfully PS2 as all hell. I've been Jimmy for Cultured Vultures. It's been wonderful as all hell to have you, and I hope to see you soon for more spooky goodness.